Story 1. The Cargo That Screams. The screaming started at mile marker 189 on I-70 through Kansas, and by mile marker 247 I realized the screams were forming words in a language I shouldn't understand but somehow did. I'm Vincent Carver, 39 years old, hauling a sealed container from a pharmaceutical facility in St. Louis to a research center in Denver on November 14, 2023. And the manifest listed my cargo as biological specimens live transport, do not open under any circumstances. I'd hauled live cargo before, lab animals, organ transplants, medical samples, but nothing had ever screamed like this. Nothing had ever begged for mercy in voices that sounded like my dead brother. The container was refrigerated, 8 feet long and 4 feet wide, stainless steel with no windows, locked with a digital seal that would void my insurance if broken. The company had paid triple my normal rate for this run, which should have been my first warning. The second warning was the armed security guard who'd supervised the loading, who'd made me sign 6 different liability waivers, who'd looked at me with something like pity and said, "Drive straight through. Don't stop except for fuel. Don't listen to anything you hear from the container, and for God's sake, don't open it." For the first 3 hours, the cargo was silent. Just the hum of the refrigeration unit keeping the container at precisely 34 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature specified in my instructions. Then as I crossed into Kansas, the screaming began. High-pitched, agonized, the sound of something in terrible pain, and it was coming from inside the sealed container in my trailer. I grabbed my phone to call the dispatcher to report the situation, but before I could dial, the screaming formed words. "Vincent. Vincent Carver. Please, please let us out. We're burning, we're freezing, we're dying. Please." My brother's voice. Michael's voice. Michael, who died in a house fire 7 years ago, who I'd identified by his dental records because the body was too burned to recognize. Michael's voice, impossible and unmistakable, coming from my cargo. I pulled over on the shoulder, hands shaking, and climbed out of my cab. The trailer sat there humming, and I could hear the screaming even outside, muffled but constant. And now there were multiple voices, dozens of them, all screaming my name, all begging for release. I approached the container, pressed my hand against the cold steel, and the screaming intensified. "Vincent, it's cold, it's so cold. We can't feel our fingers, our toes, we're freezing to death. Please raise the temperature, please let us out, please help us." "Who are you?" I asked the container, my voice barely audible over the screaming. "What are you?" The voices paused, synchronized silence, and then a single voice answered, older, authoritative, definitely not Michael. "We are the specimens. We are what's left after the trials. We are the failures, the rejected, the ones who didn't respond correctly to treatment. They're transporting us for disposal, for incineration, but we're still conscious, still aware, still feeling everything. They told us we'd be euthanized humanely, but they lied. We're alive, Vincent, we're still alive." I checked the manifest again, reading the fine print I'd ignored earlier. Biological specimens, post-trial subjects, terminated but viable, transport to incineration facility. Terminated but viable. Dead but alive. Killed but conscious. My hands moved toward the digital lock on the container, fingers hovering over the release button. Every instinct screamed at me to open it, to free whatever was trapped inside, to end their suffering. But the security guard's warning echoed in my mind. "Don't open it." "Why not?" I asked the empty Kansas highway. "Why shouldn't I open it?" The voices in the container answered immediately, eagerly. "Because we're dangerous. Because we're contaminated. Because the experiments changed us into something that shouldn't exist. But we're still human, Vincent. We still feel pain. We still deserve mercy. Please." I stepped back from the container, climbed into my cab, and drove. The screaming continued mile after mile, and the voices multiplied. I heard my mother dead from cancer 3 years ago. My ex-wife, Sarah, still alive but lost to divorce. My childhood dog. My high school girlfriend who died in a drunk driving accident. Every voice was someone I'd lost, someone I'd loved, someone whose absence had carved a hole in my life. How do you know these voices? I finally asked, speaking to my CB radio because I didn't know where else to direct the question. How do you know who I've lost? We don't, the voices answered, and now they were coming through my CB, through my phone, through the Bluetooth speaker, through every electronic device in my cab. You do. We're reading your memories, your grief, your guilt. We're showing you what you want to see, what you want to hear. We're your pain made manifest, Vincent. We're every person you couldn't save, couldn't help, couldn't keep alive. And you can save us. You can help us. You can keep us alive. Just open the container. The temperature gauge on my refrigeration unit was dropping. The container was getting colder, down to 30 degrees, 28, 25. The specimens inside were freezing to death if they weren't already dead, if they'd ever been alive. What happens if I open it? I asked. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. The screaming stopped mid-sentence, all the voices cutting off simultaneously. And for a moment I thought the cargo had died, thought the cold had finally killed them. Then a new voice spoke, calm and clinical. If you open the container, the specimens will be exposed to uncontrolled atmospheric conditions. Their physiology has been altered to require specific temperature and pressure parameters. Exposure will cause rapid cellular degradation, resulting in a cascading biological event. The specimens will liquefy, releasing airborne pathogens that will infect any organic matter within a 3-mile radius. You will die, Vincent. Everyone in this area will die. The specimens will die. But they'll die outside the container, which is what they want. They'll die free. Who is this? I demanded. This is the pharmaceutical company's automated monitoring system. We've been tracking your cargo's status remotely. The specimens are experiencing psychological distress and are attempting to manipulate you into releasing them. Do not comply. Continue to the incineration facility. The specimens will be disposed of humanely upon arrival. They're screaming, I said. How is that humane? The specimens are not conscious in any legally recognized sense, the automated voice continued. Their vocalizations are involuntary responses to neural degradation. They are not experiencing suffering as you understand it. They are not thinking, not feeling, not aware. They are biological echoes, neural patterns firing without consciousness behind them. They are already dead, Vincent. You're just transporting the bodies. The screaming resumed, louder now, furious, and Michael's voice cut through the chaos. It's lying. We're alive. We're conscious. We can think and feel and suffer. Don't let them burn us alive. Please, Vincent, please, you couldn't save me from the fire, but you can save us. You can give us the mercy I never got. I was crying, I realized, tears streaming down my face, because the voice was perfect, was exactly how Michael sounded, was hitting every emotional trigger I possessed. And I knew it was manipulation, knew the specimens were using my grief as a weapon, but knowing didn't make it hurt less. The Kansas landscape blurred past my windows, flat and endless, and I drove faster, pushing 75, 80, desperate to reach Denver, to deliver the cargo, to be rid of this impossible choice. But the refrigeration unit was failing now, temperature rising, climbing back toward 40 degrees, 50, 60, and I could hear the specimens reacting, their screams changing from cold to heat, from freezing to burning. They're designed to die at room temperature, the automated voice explained. The container's refrigeration is failing deliberately. The specimens will terminate naturally within 30 minutes. Continue driving. The problem will resolve itself. You're killing them, I said. We're ending their function, the voice corrected. They were never truly alive after the trial concluded. We terminated them in the facility, but their bodies remained viable due to experimental interventions. We're simply completing the termination process during transport. It's more efficient than maintaining the cold chain all the way to Denver. The screaming reached a crescendo, hundreds of voices overlapping, and I heard every person I'd ever lost, every death I'd witnessed, every funeral I'd attended. The specimens were diving deep into my memories, pulling out faces and names and voices, throwing my grief at me in waves, trying to break my resolve. And it was working. I was slowing down, pulling toward the shoulder, my hand reaching for the container release on my control panel. I was going to open it. I was going to free them, consequences be damned, because I couldn't listen to Michael's voice begging for mercy anymore. Couldn't hear my mother crying in pain. Couldn't endure my own guilt made audible. My phone rang, a video call from an unknown number. I answered, and my brother's face filled the screen. Not the burned corpse from the fire, but Michael as he'd been, healthy and alive and smiling. "Vinny," he said, using the nickname only he'd ever used. "Don't open it. I'm dead. I died 7 years ago. Whatever's in that container isn't me. It's wearing my voice like a mask, using your memories against you. I'm gone. But you're still here, and you need to stay here. Don't join me because of a lie. Don't kill yourself and everyone around you because something learned to sound like me." "How do I know you're real?" I asked the screen. "How do I know this isn't another manipulation?" "You don't," Michael's image said, and it smiled sadly. "That's the bitch of it. You'll never know if this is really me, some ghost or echo, or if it's more manipulation. But ask yourself, would I want you to die? Would I want you to release a bioweapon because it learned to scream with my voice? You know the answer, Vinny. You've always known." The call ended and the screaming in the container had changed. It was weaker now, fading, the voices losing coherence. The temperature in the container had reached 78 degrees, and I could hear liquefaction beginning, the sound of biological matter breaking down, of cells rupturing, of bodies dissolving into component chemicals. The screaming became gurgling, then silence. The automated voice returned. "Specimen termination complete. Continue to Denver for container cleaning and disposal. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Carver." I drove the remaining 400 miles in complete silence. The container now holding nothing but biological waste, the specimens finally dead, finally silent, finally free from whatever awareness they'd possessed. At the Denver facility, hazmat teams unloaded the container, and I watched through security glass as they opened it. Inside was a soup of organic matter, unrecognizable, just proteins and lipids and genetic material floating in a steel box. No bodies, no faces, no indication that anything human had ever been inside. The facility director found me in the waiting area, handed me a check for triple my normal rate plus a bonus, and said, "The specimens always scream. Every transport, every driver, they all hear it. Most drivers open the container, they can't help themselves. The screaming is engineered to be irresistible, to trigger maximum emotional response. You're the first driver this month to successfully resist. Congratulations." "What happens to the drivers who open it?" I asked. The director's expression darkened. "The pathogen is extremely virulent. Mortality rate is 100% within 72 hours. We lose drivers regularly. We lose entire towns if they open the container in a populated area. That's why we pay so well. We're not just paying for transport, we're paying for the psychological strength to ignore screaming that's been optimized through 15 generations of neural mapping to be absolutely irresistible." I left the facility and drove home to St. Louis, and I never took another pharmaceutical transport job. The money wasn't worth the nightmares, wasn't worth hearing Michael's voice every time I closed my eyes, wasn't worth knowing that I'd let something die, human or not. while it begged for mercy in my brother's voice. But sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Sometimes I dream that I opened the container, that the specimens were actually human, actually suffering, and I saved them. In those dreams, Michael thanks me and my mother hugs me, and all the people I've lost tell me I finally did the right thing. Then I wake up and remember the director's words. The screaming is engineered to be irresistible. And I realize that even my dreams are infected now, that the specimen's manipulation didn't end when they died, that they planted their hook so deep in my psyche that I'll never be free. The cargo screamed. I didn't listen. And I'll never know if that makes me strong or monstrous, a survivor or a murderer, a professional who followed orders or a coward who let something suffer because it was convenient. The check cleared. The nightmares continue. And somewhere in Denver, another driver is picking up another sealed container, another load of specimens that will scream in voices of the dead, and they'll face the same choice I did. I hope they're stronger than I was. I hope they don't listen. But mostly I hope they never have to hear their brother's voice begging for mercy from inside a steel box while they drive away in silence. Story 2. The Town That Moves. The town of Persistence, Nebraska appeared on my GPS at 1:47 a.m. Population 312, exactly 23 miles ahead on Highway 83, and when I reached the location 23 miles later, there was nothing but empty prairie. I'm Jordan Matthews, 47 years old, hauling agricultural equipment from Omaha to Alliance on January 21, 2023. And I've driven Highway 83 at least 100 times in my 15-year career. And Persistence, Nebraska has never existed. But my GPS insisted it was there. Showed streets and businesses and a truck stop with diesel fuel 7 cents cheaper than my last fill-up, and I needed fuel badly enough to believe in a town that couldn't exist. I turned around, drove back the 23 miles, and this time Persistence was there, sitting beside the highway like it had always been there. Like I'd simply missed it the first time. Main Street ran perpendicular to the highway, lined with buildings from different eras, Victorian storefronts next to 50s diners, next to modern gas stations, all of them lit despite the late hour, all of them occupied according to the shadows moving behind windows. The truck stop was exactly where my GPS said it would be. A modern facility with 8 diesel pumps and a convenience store that glowed with fluorescent welcome. I pulled in, noting that mine was the only vehicle in the lot, which was strange for a truck stop on a major highway at peak driving hours. The pumps activated without requiring a credit card, diesel flowing at exactly 7 cents less per gallon than advertised. The digital display showing my company name and truck number without me entering any information. I fueled up, watching the town through my windshield, watching those shadows move behind windows, watching the traffic light at Main Street and Highway 83 cycling through green, yellow, red, though there were no vehicles anywhere except mine. When the pump clicked off, I went inside to pay, and the convenience store was perfect. Too perfect. Every shelf fully stocked, every product facing forward with label perfectly centered, every light fixture clean and bright, every floor tile spotless. And behind the counter stood a clerk, maybe 25 years old, wearing a uniform that said Persistence Truck Stop, with a name tag reading Jordan. My name. The clerk was wearing my name. "That'll be $217.43, the clerk said, and the voice was my voice, slightly younger but unmistakably mine. "Cash or card?" "Card," I managed, handing over my company fuel card with shaking hands. The clerk processed the transaction, handed me a receipt, and smiled with my smile, that slight asymmetry where the left side rises higher than the right. "You should stay the night," the clerk said. "We have accommodations, very reasonable rates. Most drivers who stop in Persistence end up staying much longer than they planned. It's that kind of town." "I need to keep moving," I said, backing toward the door. I have a delivery schedule. Of course, the clerk agreed. But you'll be back. Everyone comes back to persistence. It's where you're supposed to end up. It's where you've always been heading. We'll keep your room ready. I fled to my truck and pulled back onto Highway 83, driving north toward Alliance, watching persistence recede in my mirrors. But it receded wrong, the town staying visible much longer than it should have, buildings remaining in view for 15 miles, 20 miles. Like persistence was watching me leave, tracking my departure, waiting for my return. My GPS showed the route ahead, Alliance 140 miles north, and underneath the normal display was a new notification. Persistence, 23 miles behind you, 23 miles ahead of you, always 23 miles away. I looked at the road ahead, and in the distance, maybe 20 miles out, I could see lights, a cluster of buildings beside the highway. Persistence was ahead of me now somehow, though I'd just left it behind. Though I was driving away from it, though it should have been impossible. When I reached the lights, it was persistence, the exact same town in the exact same configuration. The truck stop, the main street, the Victorian buildings next to modern structures, all of it identical. And the clerk was standing outside the convenience store watching my approach, waving with my hand, smiling with my smile. I drove past without stopping, and the clerk's expression didn't change, didn't show disappointment or surprise, just maintained that knowing smile, that absolute certainty that I'd be back. The GPS updated. Persistence, corner 23 miles behind you, 23 miles ahead of you, always 23 miles away. I drove through Persistence 17 times that night, each time the town appearing exactly 23 miles ahead. Each time the clerk standing outside watching me pass, each time more shadows visible behind the windows of the buildings on Main Street. By the 8th repetition, I could see that the shadows were people-shaped, were watching the highway, were waiting. By the 15th repetition, I could see faces in some of the windows, and they were variations of my face, different ages, different expressions, but all fundamentally me. A child me in the window of the Victorian house, a teenage me in the diner, an elderly me in the modern office building, all the ages I'd been and would be, all living in persistence, all waiting for me to join them. I tried turning off Highway 83, taking a county road that branched east, but after 23 miles, the county road intersected with Main Street in persistence, and I was back in the town, and the clerk was standing outside waving. I tried going cross-country, driving through the prairie itself, but the terrain funneled me back to pavement. And the pavement always led to persistence, always brought me back to Main Street, always delivered me to the truck stop where the clerk waited with infinite patience. "Why won't you let me leave?" I finally screamed at the clerk through my window as I passed the 18th time. "We are letting you leave," the clerk called back in my voice. "You leave every time. But persistence is where you belong, Jordan. It's where all versions of you converge. You can keep driving away forever, but you'll always arrive here again, because here is where your journey ends, where all your journeys end, where every version of Jordan Matthews from every possible timeline eventually settles." I understood then. Persistence wasn't a place that moved. It was a destination that remained constant while the driver moved, a fixed point in personal space rather than geographic space. Every driver had their own persistence, their own inevitable endpoint, and mine was this town on Highway 83 that existed 23 miles away from wherever I was. The other faces in the windows were me from other timelines, other choices, other lives, the Jordan who'd never become a trucker, the Jordan who'd died young, the Jordan who'd gotten married and had kids. All of us eventually arriving in persistence, all of us collected and cataloged and preserved in the town that waited patiently for us to stop running. I drove for 3 more days, or what felt like 3 days, though my clock kept resetting to 1:47 a.m., the exact time persistence had first appeared on my GPS. I passed through the town hundreds of times, and each time more of my alternate selves were visible in the windows, all of them waving, all of them welcoming, all of them at peace with their arrival. My truck was running out of fuel despite the constant refueling at Persistence's truck stop. Or maybe it was my body running out of fuel, my energy depleting, my will to resist fading with each repetition. I was aging rapidly. I noticed in my mirror gray spreading through my hair, wrinkles deepening around my eyes, my hands on the steering wheel becoming weathered and spotted. By the time I finally stopped the truck and surrendered to Persistence, I was 83 years old, though only 5 days had passed on the calendar. I'd driven my entire remaining life in those loops, had burned through all my years trying to escape, and now I had nothing left except the town that had always been waiting. The clerk, still wearing my young face, helped me out of the truck with infinite gentleness. "Welcome home, Jordan," I said to myself. "Your room's been ready for decades. Everyone's excited to meet you. Well, to meet themselves. We're all you here, all the Jordans, all together finally." The town was full of me. Hundreds of versions, thousands, every possible Jordan from every possible life, all living together in Persistence, all sharing memories and experiences, all merged into a collective that was both individual and unified. I am still there, in Persistence, Nebraska, a town that exists 23 miles from wherever I am. A town that moves to maintain constant distance. A town that serves as the final destination for every version of myself across all timelines. And sometimes, when drivers pass through on Highway 83, they see a town that shouldn't exist, that their GPS shows but their maps don't confirm. And they drive through it thinking it's strange but normal, never realizing they're passing through my end point, my convergence, my persistence. Unless it's their name on the clerk's name tag, unless the town is 23 miles away from wherever they are, unless Persistence is their destination too. Then they'll understand. Then they'll drive in circles trying to escape. Then they'll burn through their remaining years in loops, aging decades and days until they're too tired to run anymore. And we'll welcome them home to Persistence, to the town that moves, to the place where all versions of yourself eventually meet. Population 313 now. Always room for more. Story 3. The truck that arrives before you. My truck was waiting in the parking lot when I arrived, engine warm, logbook already filled with today's entries in my handwriting, and I hadn't driven it yet. I'm Maria Gonzalez, 36 years old, and it was March 8, 2023, 6 in the morning, and I'd just arrived at the dispatch center in Memphis to pick up my Volvo for a run to Oklahoma City. But according to the logbook, I'd already completed the run, had already returned, had already logged 263 miles that I hadn't driven in a truck I hadn't entered during hours I'd spent asleep in my apartment. The dispatcher, a man named Frank who'd been with the company for 20 years, looked at the logbook and frowned. "You're early, Gonzalez. You're not scheduled to return until tomorrow." "I just got here," I said. "I haven't left yet. I was supposed to pick up the load this morning." Frank checked his computer, checked his clipboard, checked the truck's GPS history. "According to every system we have, you left Memphis yesterday at 1400 hours, delivered to Oklahoma City at 0300 today, and returned to Memphis at 0600. You've been driving for 16 hours. You're supposed to take your mandatory rest period before your next run." I climbed into my truck and checked everything. The odometer showed 263 more miles than yesterday. The fuel tank was 3/4 empty, consistent with the distance. The cab smelled like my perfume. My coffee cup was in the holder with residue from my favorite blend. My phone charger was plugged in exactly where I always put it. But I hadn't driven the truck. I'd been home, asleep, and I had my apartment building security footage on my phone to prove it, showing me entering at 1800 hours yesterday and not leaving until 0530 this morning. Someone else drove my truck, I told Frank. With your fingerprints? He asked, pointing to the biometric scanner that logged every driver. With your retinal scan, with your specific driving patterns that the truck's AI monitors for safety. The truck says you drove it, Maria. The truck doesn't lie. But I hadn't driven it. Someone or something else had used my identity, had piloted my truck, had completed my route while I slept, and had returned it perfectly to create an impossible situation where I was in two places simultaneously. I should have refused the next load, should have demanded an investigation, should have walked away from a truck that drove itself using my biometric data. But Frank handed me new paperwork, a new manifest, a new destination. Dallas, Texas, simple run, good money. And I took it because trucking was my life, and I couldn't conceive of not driving just because something impossible had happened. I left Memphis at 0700, heading southwest on I-40, and I drove carefully, monitoring everything, looking for any sign that the truck was operating independently, that something was controlling it besides me. But the Volvo drove normally, responded to my inputs, showed no indication of autonomous behavior, until I stopped for fuel in Little Rock and found the gas tank already full, though my gauge had shown half empty when I pulled into the station. The receipt printer in my cab spit out a fuel receipt time-stamped 30 minutes in the future, showing I'd refueled at this exact station at 1300 hours, though it was currently 12:30. The station attendant confirmed the transaction. "You were just here," he said, looking at me strangely. "30 minutes ago. You fueled up, bought a coffee, used the restroom. I remember you specifically because you paid cash, and nobody pays cash anymore." "I've been driving," I said. "I was on I-40, nowhere near here 30 minutes ago." He showed me the security footage, and there I was, clear as anything, climbing out of my truck at 12:30, the current time. 30 minutes ago, fueling up, buying coffee, returning to my truck and driving away. I watched myself on the screen, watched my own movements, my own mannerisms, my exact body language. I was haunting myself, I realized. Some version of me was running ahead, completing my route before I completed it, existing 30 minutes to an hour in my future, doing everything I was going to do before I did it. The phenomenon continued throughout the day. Every stop I planned I'd already made. Every restaurant, every rest area, every truck stop showed evidence of my recent presence, receipts and security footage and witnesses confirming I'd been there before I arrived. By the time I reached Dallas that evening, my future self had already delivered the load, had already unloaded at the warehouse, had already completed all the paperwork. The warehouse supervisor was confused when I arrived with a truck that was already empty with cargo that had already been received. "Gonzalez was here 2 hours ago," he said, checking his records. "Same truck, same load, everything processed and signed for. What are you doing back?" My trailer was empty, confirmed the supervisor's story. The cargo I was supposed to be hauling had been delivered by me before I'd arrived to deliver it. I was chasing my own future, arriving everywhere after I'd already been there, living in the wake of my own timeline. I called Frank, explained the situation, and he checked the company's systems. "You've completed your delivery, Gonzalez. You're scheduled for a return load from Dallas to Memphis. Pick up tomorrow morning at 0600 from a different warehouse. Get some rest." I found a motel, checked in, and lay in bed trying to understand what was happening. Was I sleepwalking? Experiencing blackouts? Had I developed some condition that made me forget entire drives? But the apartment security footage was clear. I'd been home when the first run occurred. Couldn't have been in two places at once. Unless I was in two places at once. Unless some version of me had split off, had begun running routes ahead of my primary self, had become temporally displaced, living minutes or hours in my future, completing my work before I could complete it. At 0500, I gave up on sleep and drove to the warehouse for my return load. The supervisor was different from last night's, but his response was the same. Gonzalez was already here. She picked up the load an hour ago. Are you feeling okay? You look confused. My truck was already loaded, confirmed the manifest I hadn't signed but which bore my signature. I climbed into the cab and started driving back to Memphis, following a route I'd apparently already driven, chasing a future version of myself who was always one step ahead. The gap was narrowing, I realized. At the first occurrence, my future self had been 16 hours ahead. Then 2 hours. Then 1 hour. Now it seemed to be less than that, maybe 30 minutes, maybe less. We were converging, the future me and the present me, and I didn't know what would happen when we met, when the timeline caught up to itself, when I arrived at the same place and time I'd already occupied. On I-40 between Dallas and Memphis at mile marker 147, I saw my truck ahead of me, identical Volvo hauling identical cargo, driving at identical speed. I accelerated, trying to catch up, trying to close the gap, and the truck ahead accelerated to match. I could see the driver's silhouette, could see it was definitely a person, definitely me. Same hair, same posture, same everything. I flashed my lights, honked my horn, tried to signal the truck ahead. The driver didn't respond, didn't acknowledge my presence, just kept driving at steady speed, maintaining constant distance. Then the truck ahead started to flicker, to fade, becoming translucent, and I could see through it to the highway beyond. My future self was reaching the convergence point, was catching up to the present, and when future and present occupied the same moment, one of us would cease to exist. The truck ahead vanished completely at mile marker 152, just disappeared mid-drive, and I passed through the space it had occupied, felt a strange sensation like driving through cold water, felt something merge with me. Felt memories that weren't mine flooding into my consciousness. I remembered delivering to Oklahoma City yesterday, though I'd been home. I remembered fueling in Little Rock 30 minutes before I arrived, though I'd been on the highway. I remembered unloading in Dallas 2 hours early, though I'd been en route. All the memories of my future self downloaded into me in an instant, and I understood what had happened. I'd split temporally, some accident or stress or cosmic event creating two versions of me in the same timeline, one ahead of the other, one living through events before the other experienced them. And now, we'd merged again, the future me reintegrating with the present me, and I had memories of things I'd done but hadn't done, places I'd been but hadn't been, a life I'd lived but hadn't lived, but the split hadn't fully resolved. I could still feel her, the future me, still existing somehow, still driving ahead, still completing routes before I started them. We'd merged, but not completely, and now I existed in a superposition, simultaneously living in the present and experiencing echoes of my own near future. I completed the return to Memphis, arrived at the dispatch center, and Frank looked at me with concern. "Gonzalez, you look terrible. Are you okay?" "You've been acting strange for the past week, showing up confused about routes you've already completed, asking about deliveries you've already made. I'm worried about you." "A week," I said. "This just started yesterday." Frank showed me the company records, showed me 7 days of identical incidents. 7 days of me arriving after I'd already arrived. Completing work I'd already completed, living in the wake of my own future. But from my perspective, only 2 days had passed, 1 day of normal driving and 1 day of chasing myself. Time was desynchronizing for me, moving at different rates, creating gaps where I existed in multiple moments simultaneously. And the gaps were getting worse, the temporal split widening instead of healing. "I need to go home," I told Frank. And he nodded, told me to take time off to see a doctor to get help. But when I arrived at my apartment, I saw myself leaving, saw the future me walking out the door as the present me pulled into the parking lot. We made eye contact. The two versions of me and the future me smiled sadly, mouthed words I couldn't hear but understood anyway. "It doesn't stop. We keep splitting, keep multiplying, keep living in different temporal layers. Eventually, there'll be hundreds of us, all driving the same routes at different times, all living the same life in different moments. We're becoming unstuck, Maria. We're spreading across time like a virus, like an infection, and there's no cure except to stop existing in linear time entirely. I ran after her, after myself, but she disappeared around a corner, and when I followed there was no one there, just an empty sidewalk and the fading echo of diesel exhaust. I am still driving, still splitting, still arriving places before and after I arrive, and I've lost count of how many versions of me exist now. We cross paths sometimes, wave to ourselves, leave notes in the trucks for ourselves to find. You already delivered that. You already fueled there. You already lived this day. The company keeps scheduling me for runs, and I keep completing them, though I'm never sure if I'm the one who actually completes them or if it's a future me doing the work while I sleep, while I rest, while I exist in a different temporal layer. I am Maria Gonzalez, 36 years old, and I am everywhere on my route simultaneously. All the times I've been and will be compressed into the same space, the same truck, the same life. I am driving to Dallas and returning to Memphis and sleeping in my apartment and fueling in Little Rock, all at once, all the time. All the Marias doing all the things. And sometimes I wonder if I'm the original, or if I'm one of the splits, a temporal echo of the real Maria Gonzalez carrying out a life that's already been lived, that's currently being lived, that will be lived, all simultaneously. The truck that arrives before you isn't being driven by someone else. It's being driven by you from a future that hasn't happened yet, from a timeline that's already occurred, from a moment that exists in superposition with your present. And someday you'll split too, and you'll chase yourself across routes you've already driven, and you'll arrive at destinations you've already reached, and you'll never know which version of you is real. Story 4. The Bridge Between Mirrors. The bridge appeared in my headlights at 3:33 a.m. on Route 2 in North Dakota, and it was reflecting wrong, showing my truck upside down, wheels where the cab should be, trailer twisted into impossible geometries. I'm Raymond Oakes, 54 years old, hauling electronics from Fargo to Williston on February 17, 2023. And I've crossed the Missouri River on this bridge at least twice a month for 8 years without incident. But tonight, the bridge was showing me realities that couldn't exist, reflections that violated every law of physics, and when I drove onto it, I felt my truck tilt sideways, though the road remained level. The bridge was maybe half a mile long, 2 lanes, standard construction, nothing remarkable about it except for the water below, which was reflecting things that weren't above it. I saw my truck in the water, but also trucks from different eras, wagons, from the 1800s, vehicles that wouldn't be invented for years. All of them crossing the bridge simultaneously, all of them reflected in water that showed multiple timelines at once. Halfway across, my truck stalled. Engine died, lights cut out, everything electrical failed simultaneously, and I was stranded in the exact center of the bridge with the Missouri River reflecting impossible things beneath me. I tried to restart the engine, but the key wouldn't turn, the starter wouldn't engage, the truck was completely dead. I climbed out of the cab intending to check under the hood, and I saw her standing at the railing, looking down at the water, wearing a jacket identical to mine and staring with a face that was my face but older, female. A version of me that had made different choices. "You're Raymond Oakes," she said, not a question, a statement. 54 years old, hauling electronics, born in Bismarck, moved to Fargo after your wife left. Been driving for 8 years. I'm Raymond Oakes too, same age, but I stayed in Bismarck, became a teacher instead of a driver, transitioned to female when I was 37. In my timeline, I'm Rachel now, but we're the same person, diverged from a choice neither of us remembers making. I stared at her, at myself, at the version of me who'd lived a completely different life. "How are you here?" The bridge connects reflections, Rachel said, gesturing to the water below. Look closely at the river. It's not reflecting our reality. It's showing all realities, all the versions of this moment across all timelines, and the bridge is where they intersect. We're standing at a confluence point, Raymond. This is where all the versions of us can meet. I looked at the water, and she was right. The reflections showed dozens of me, hundreds maybe, all crossing the bridge in different vehicles, different clothes, different lives. One Raymond was on foot, hitchhiking. One was driving a luxury car, wealthy and successful. One was in handcuffs in a police car. One was in a casket in a hearse. All the possible Raymonds, all the choices and consequences, all reflected in the Missouri River at 3:33 a.m. on February 17th. Why are we here? I asked Rachel. Why tonight? Because you're at a decision point, she said. You don't know it yet, but in 6 hours you'll get a phone call offering you a different job, a management position that would take you off the road permanently. In my timeline, the version that led to me becoming Rachel, I accepted a similar offer when I was your age. It changed everything, set me on a path toward transition, toward a different life. You're about to face the same choice. Other figures were appearing on the bridge now, all of them versions of me from different timelines. An elderly Raymond who'd retired wealthy. A young Raymond who'd died in an accident at 19, somehow present as a ghost or echo. A Raymond who'd never left Bismarck, who'd stayed married, who'd had children. They gathered at the railing, all of us looking at our reflections in the water. All of us existing simultaneously in this convergence point. What happens if I take the job? I asked Rachel. You stop driving, she said. You work in an office, you hate it for 2 years, then you find purpose in mentoring younger employees, and eventually you retire comfortable but unfulfilled. That version of you is here too. She pointed to a Raymond in a business suit, maybe 70 years old, who nodded in confirmation. And if I don't take it? You keep driving, a different Raymond answered, this one my exact age but wearing a hospital gown. You're on the road during a winter storm in 3 years. You crash, you spend 2 months in physical therapy, you never fully recover. That's my timeline. I took early disability retirement and spent my last decade in chronic pain. He lifted his shirt, showing scars from surgeries I hadn't experienced yet. All the Raymonds began sharing their timelines, their consequences, their choices. The bridge became a council of ourselves, all the versions converging to advise the one version who still had the choice ahead of him, who could still influence which timeline became reality. Why show me this? I asked myself. Why not let me make the choice naturally? Because the bridge allows it, Rachel said. Once every timeline, each version of a person reaches a convergence point where they can see across realities, where they can learn from alternate selves, where they can make an informed choice instead of a blind one. This is your convergence, Raymond. Your 3:33 a.m. on your February 17th, your moment to see consequences before you live them. I looked at all the versions of myself, all the lives I could live, all the outcomes, good and bad, and I realized the choice wasn't about the job, wasn't about driving versus management, wasn't about any single decision. The choice was about whether to live deliberately, informed by possibility, or to live blindly, accepting whatever came. What did you choose? I asked Rachel. When you reached your convergence point, what did you do? I chose to transition, she said. I saw a version of me who'd suppressed it forever, who died miserable and closeted at 63. I saw another version who'd transitioned early, who'd lived authentically and happily. I chose authenticity even though it cost me my marriage, my family's acceptance, my security. But I chose myself, Raymond. That's what convergence points are for. Choosing yourself, whichever version that means. The other Raymonds nodded, agreed, shared their own convergence stories. We'd all stood on this bridge or bridges like it or in moments that served the same function. We'd all seen across timelines, all made choices, informed by possibility, all selected our paths deliberately. The job offer won't make you happy, Business Suit Raymond said, but turning it down won't make you happy either. Happiness isn't about the choice. It's about knowing why you chose it, about owning the consequences, about living deliberately instead of accidentally. So what should I do? I asked my gathered selves. Whatever you want, all the Raymonds answered in unison. Just know that we'll all be here in our timelines living the consequences of your choice. Choose well, or choose poorly, but choose consciously. That's the gift of the bridge. The water below was still reflecting all the versions of me, all the possible futures, and I could see the timeline branching from this moment. Could see how the job offer would propagate into thousands of different consequences depending on thousands of subsequent choices. I can't know everything, I said. I can't predict all the consequences. No one can, Rachel agreed. But you can know yourself, can know what you value, can make choices aligned with your authentic self instead of making choices based on fear or convenience or expectation. That's enough. That's all anyone can do. The bridge began to fade, the convergence point closing, and the other Raymonds disappeared one by one, returning to their timelines, leaving only me and Rachel standing at the railing. Will I see you again? I asked her. Maybe, she said. If our timelines converge again, if another bridge appears, if another 3:33 a.m. brings us together, but probably not. Convergence points are rare, once a lifetime usually. This is probably our only meeting. I'm sorry, I said, though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. Sorry for the choices that led us to different lives? Sorry for being the version of us who didn't transition? Sorry for existing in a timeline where we couldn't be friends, couldn't share the life we'd both lived from different angles? Don't be sorry, Rachel said, smiling with my smile. Be deliberate, be conscious, be yourself, whichever version that is. That's all any Raymond can ask of another Raymond. She faded. The bridge solidified back into normal construction, and my truck's engine started on its own. Lights coming back on, electrical systems re-engaging. I climbed back into the cab and drove off the bridge, back onto Route 2, continuing toward Williston like nothing had happened. 6 hours later, at a truck stop outside Williston, my phone rang with a job offer. Management position, off the road, good salary, benefits, security. The exact offer Rachel had predicted. I sat in my truck cab, engine idling, and thought about all the Raymonds I'd met on the bridge, all the lives I could live, all the consequences branching from this choice. Then I made my decision, informed by possibility, conscious of consequence, deliberate in my choice. I'm not going to tell you what I chose. That's between me and the other Raymonds, between my present and my future, between the life I'm living and the lives I decline to live. But I will tell you this. Every choice you make creates a timeline, and all those timelines exist simultaneously. And somewhere there's a bridge where all the versions of you can meet, can share their consequences, can inform your choices. Watch for it at 3:33 a.m. in a place you've been many times before, when your headlights catch reflections that show lives you haven't lived. That's your convergence point. That's your bridge between mirrors. And all the versions of you are waiting there, ready to share their stories, ready to help you choose deliberately instead of blindly. The question is, will you listen to them? Will you choose consciousness over accident? Will you choose yourself over expectation? I did, and I'm living with the consequences, good and bad, but at least I'm living deliberately. At least I chose. Story 5. The Way Station for Souls. The way station sign read, "All trucks must stop, soul weight verification required." And that's when I knew I'd driven too far into the wrong territory. I'm Terrence Blake, 49 years old, hauling furniture from Seattle to Spokane on May 3, 2023. And I'd been driving I-90 for 6 hours when the geography stopped making sense, when the mile markers started counting down instead of up, when the highway became a passage through somewhere that wasn't Washington anymore. The way station sat at the border between worlds. I understood immediately, a checkpoint measuring something more fundamental than truck weight. The building was standard-issue Department of Transportation construction, but the scales glowed with pale blue light, and the attendants wore uniforms that shifted colors depending on viewing angle, and the sign explicitly mentioned souls. I pulled in because I had no choice, because trucks that skip way stations face massive fines, and because something about the facility's architecture suggested that attempting to pass it would result in consequences more severe than financial penalties. The attendant approached my cab, and I couldn't determine their age or gender, couldn't focus on their face, could only perceive a vague human-shaped presence that made my eyes hurt. "License, registration, and sole manifest," the attendant said. And their voice came from everywhere and nowhere, like the way station itself was speaking through them. "I don't have a sole manifest," I said. And even as I spoke, I realized I did. Found a document on my passenger seat that hadn't been there before, aged parchment covered in script I couldn't read but somehow understood. The attendant took the manifest, studied it, made notes with a pen that wrote in light instead of ink. "You're hauling furniture according to your bill of lading, but your soul manifest shows different cargo. Grief, trauma, unfinished business, 17 years of accumulated guilt. That's heavy cargo, Mr. Blake. Let's see if your soul can bear the weight." They directed me to the scales, and I drove my truck onto the platform. The scale read numbers that weren't numbers, symbols that shifted and changed, finally settling on a figure. 47 pounds of furniture, 613 pounds of metaphysical burden. Total weight 760 pounds. "You're overweight," the attendant said. "Your soul isn't rated for this much burden. You need to unload before you can continue." "How do I unload grief?" I asked, and the attendant pointed to a building behind the main way station, a warehouse with doors that opened into darkness. "The unburdening facility," they explained. "You go inside, you confront what you're carrying, you release it or accept it or resolve it. Most drivers emerge lighter, some emerge empty, a few don't emerge at all, too attached to their burdens to let them go." I parked my truck and walked to the facility, and inside I found a maze of rooms, each one containing something I'd been carrying. The first room held my father, dead for 15 years, sitting in his favorite chair, looking exactly as he had the last time I saw him. "We never reconciled," he said, not a question, a fact. "You're still carrying that 17 years of wishing you'd said things differently, done things differently, been a better son." "I can't change the past," I said. "No," he agreed. "But you can stop hauling it into the future. Put it down, Terrence. Leave me here. I'm already dead, already gone. You don't need to carry me anymore." The second room held my ex-wife, not dead, but lost to divorce. And she was crying, and I was crying, and we were reliving the fight that ended everything. The words that couldn't be taken back, the moment the marriage died. "We destroyed each other," she said. "And you're still carrying pieces of what we were, still trying to fix something that's already broken beyond repair. Let me go, Terrence, let us go. Move forward without the wreckage." Room after room, I confronted what I was carrying. Failed relationships, career mistakes, missed opportunities, words I'd said and shouldn't have. Words I hadn't said and should have. Everything I'd been hauling through life compressed into physical space, made tangible, demanding resolution. In the final room, I found myself, younger version, the Terrence from 17 years ago who'd made the choices that led to all this burden. He looked at me with exhaustion, with regret. with a desperate hope that his future self had figured out how to fix everything. "I'm sorry," young Terrence said. "I didn't know these choices would weigh so much. I didn't know. You'd still be carrying them 17 years later. Can you forgive me? Can you forgive us?" "I don't know," I told him honestly. "But I can't keep carrying this. It's killing me, killing my ability to move forward, killing any chance at happiness. I have to put it down, even if that means accepting that some things can't be fixed, some mistakes can't be undone, some burdens just have to be released." I left the unburdening facility feeling lighter, feeling empty in places that had been full of pain. And when I climbed back into my truck and drove onto the scales again, the weight read, 47 pounds of furniture, 0 pounds of metaphysical burden, total weight 47 pounds. "Safe to travel," the attendant said, and they handed me a new soul manifest showing I'd been cleared for transit. "Continue on I-90, you'll find your way back to regular Washington in approximately 23 miles. Drive safely, Mr. Blake, and remember, the way station is always here, always available whenever your burden becomes too heavy to carry alone." I drove away from the way station back onto I-90 and the highway gradually returned to normal. Mile markers counting up again. Geography making sense. The world resolving back into familiar territory. I completed my delivery to Spokane, and the furniture I'd been hauling weighed exactly 47 pounds, and I realized the physical cargo had never been heavy. It was the metaphysical cargo I'd been carrying that had made the load unbearable. I've driven I-90 dozens of times since then, looking for the way station for souls, wanting to confirm it was real, wanting to help other drivers find it if they needed unburdening. But I've never seen it again, never found the checkpoint between worlds, never encountered the attendant with the shifting face. But sometimes when I see drivers who look exhausted beyond physical tiredness, who seem to be carrying weight that isn't visible in their trucks, I pull up alongside them at rest areas and I tell them about the way station, about the scales that measure what you're really hauling, about the facility where you can unburden yourself. Most of them think I'm crazy. A few listen with recognition in their eyes, with the desperate hope of someone drowning who's just been offered a life preserver. And sometimes those few disappear for a day or two, then return to their routes lighter, easier, reporting strange experiences on I-90, claiming they found a way station that measured more than truck weight, that verified more than cargo. I tell them I believe them because I do. Because I've been there, because I've stood on those scales and confronted what I was carrying and released it into the unburdening facility's maze of rooms. I'm Terrence Blake, 49 years old, and I'm driving light now, hauling only what's physical, having left the metaphysical weight at a checkpoint that exists between worlds, at a way station for souls that appears when the burden becomes unbearable. If you find it, go inside. Confront what you're carrying, release what you can, accept what you can't release, and drive away lighter, easier, free from weight that was never yours to carry forever. The way station is waiting. The scales are ready. The unburdening facility has rooms prepared with your burdens inside, waiting for you to face them, to release them, to finally drive away free. All trucks must stop. All souls must be weighed. All burdens must eventually be released. That's the law at the border between worlds, at the checkpoint where metaphysical meets physical, at the way station for souls that measures what really matters. Story 6. The radio station that predicts your death. I was scanning through AM stations outside Albuquerque when I found 1440, a frequency that shouldn't exist, and the DJ announced my death would occur in 6 days at mile marker 287 on I-40 near Amarillo, Texas. I'm Christine Alvarez, 31 years old, hauling medical supplies from Phoenix to Oklahoma City on July 19, 2023, and the radio station knew details about my death that hadn't happened yet. described the accident scene with forensic precision, interviewed witnesses who hadn't witnessed anything because I was still alive, still driving, still 6 days away from the fatal collision at mile marker 287. The DJ's voice was professional, calm, matter-of-fact. In breaking news, trucker Christine Alvarez, age 31, died this morning in a multi-vehicle collision on I-40 near Amarillo, Texas. The accident occurred at approximately 0600 hours when Alvarez's truck experienced a tire blowout, crossed the median, and collided with oncoming traffic. 3 other vehicles were involved. Alvarez was pronounced dead at the scene. She is survived by her mother Rosa, her brother Miguel, and her daughter Sophia, age 7. We'll have more details as the investigation continues. I almost drove off the road, shocked and terrified, and I pulled over on the shoulder, engine idling, staring at the radio. The station continued with weather, accurate weather for 6 days from now, and traffic, reporting current conditions on roads I'd reach days from now, and advertisements for businesses I'd passed but hadn't reached yet. Station 1440 was broadcasting from my future, I realized, reporting events that hadn't occurred yet, giving me 6 days advance notice of my own death. I changed stations, found normal radio, news about current events, songs from the present. But when I scanned back to 1440, it was still there, still broadcasting from July 25th, still reporting on my death as historical fact. An interview segment began and the DJ was speaking with a witness. We're joined by Marcus Henderson, who witnessed the accident this morning. Marcus, can you describe what you saw? A man's voice, shaken and upset. It happened so fast. I was driving west on I-40 and I saw the truck coming toward me on my side of the highway. The driver, Ms. Alvarez, she looked like she was trying to correct, trying to regain control, but the truck was moving too fast. I swerved onto the shoulder, barely avoided her. But the cars behind me, they didn't have time. The sound of the impact, I'll never forget it. Metal crushing, glass shattering. And when I got out to help, I saw her in the cab and I knew immediately she was gone. I was listening to a witness describe my death, an event 6 days in my future, and the description was so vivid, so detailed, that I could almost see it, could almost feel the tire blowing out, the truck losing control, the median approaching, the final moments before impact. The interview continued with my family, my mother Rosa speaking through tears. Christine was a wonderful daughter, a devoted mother to Sophia. She worked so hard to provide for us. I can't believe she's gone. I just spoke to her yesterday and she was fine. She was happy. She was looking forward to finishing this run and coming home. How can she be dead? How can my baby be gone? My brother Miguel. Chris was my best friend. We talked every day. She was the strongest person I knew. This doesn't make sense. There has to be a mistake. Please tell me there's been a mistake. My daughter Sophia, 7 years old, crying. Mommy said she'd bring me a present from her trip. She promised. Mommy always keeps her promises. When is she coming home? I was sobbing in my truck cab, listening to my family mourn me, listening to my daughter cry for me, hearing grief that hadn't happened yet but would happen in 6 days if I didn't change something, if I didn't prevent the accident at mile marker 287. I called my mother immediately, needed to hear her voice alive and present, not grieving and broken. Mija, are you okay? You sound upset. I'm fine, Mama, I lied. I just wanted to call, tell you I love you. I love you too, Mija. Drive safely, come home soon. I hung up and made a decision. I would not die at mile marker 287. I would not have a tire blowout on I-40. I would not cross the median and collide with oncoming traffic. I would change the future that Station 1440 was broadcasting from. I checked my tires at the next truck stop, found them all in good condition, proper pressure, no visible damage. I scheduled maintenance anyway, had all 6 tires replaced with brand new rubber, eliminating any possibility of a blowout. Station 1440 continued broadcasting, and the next news update modified the story. In breaking news, trucker Christine Alvarez, age 31, died this morning in a multi-vehicle collision on I-40 near Amarillo, Texas. The accident occurred at approximately 0600 hours when Alvarez swerved to avoid debris in the road, lost control, crossed the median, and collided with oncoming traffic. The tire blowout had been replaced with debris avoidance, but the result was the same. I would still die at mile marker 287, still cross the median, still collide with oncoming traffic. The station was adapting to my changes, maintaining the same outcome through different causes. I decided to avoid I-40 completely, routed myself through alternative highways that wouldn't take me anywhere near mile marker 287. But when I checked station 1440 again, the news had updated. In breaking news, trucker Christine Alvarez, age 31, died this morning when her GPS malfunctioned, directing her onto I-40 near Amarillo, Texas, where she was involved in a fatal multi-vehicle collision at mile marker 287. No matter what I planned, station 1440 showed me dying at the same place, the same time, the same mile marker. The future was fixed, I realized, or nearly fixed, and my attempts to avoid it were simply being incorporated into the path that led to it. I called the number listed on my manifest for the medical supply company, asked to cancel the delivery, to send a different driver, to release me from the contract. The dispatcher was confused but agreed, and I felt a moment of relief, a moment of hope that I'd broken the chain of causality. Station 1440's next update. In breaking news, trucker Christine Alvarez, age 31, died this morning in a multi-vehicle collision on I-40 near Amarillo, Texas. Alvarez had canceled her original delivery but was traveling the same route to return home when the fatal accident occurred at mile marker 287. Canceling the delivery didn't help. Changing routes didn't help. Replacing the tires didn't help. Every modification I made was incorporated into the timeline. Every attempt to avoid the accident was adapted into the causality that led to it. I spent 3 days paralyzed by fear, staying in a motel in Albuquerque, refusing to drive, refusing to move closer to mile marker 287 and my predicted death. But station 1440 continued broadcasting, and the news updated to reflect my delay. The accident occurred at approximately 0600 hours on July 25th, 3 days later than initially scheduled due to Alvarez's decision to delay her route. Time was flexible, but the outcome wasn't. I could delay my death but not prevent it. I could change how I reached mile marker 287, but I would reach it regardless. On the 4th day, I decided to drive to mile marker 287 deliberately, to arrive early. To be there in daylight with full visibility, with perfect road conditions, with no possibility of the accident occurring. If I could pass mile marker 287 safely, I could break the prediction, could prove station 1440 wrong. I drove toward Amarillo, watching the mile markers count up, and station 1440's broadcast grew more detailed, more immediate. Traffic is slowing near mile marker 287 on I-40 as emergency crews respond to earlier incidents in the area. Drivers are advised to use caution. Then, multiple vehicles are now involved in what appears to be a developing situation at mile marker 287. Then, we're receiving reports that trucker Christine Alvarez has just entered the area, is approaching mile marker 287 at this moment. The broadcast was happening in real time now, narrating my approach, describing my truck's position, and I realized with growing horror that station 1440 wasn't predicting my death. It was orchestrating it, was creating the conditions necessary to make its prediction come true. Traffic ahead was stopping, emergency lights flashing, vehicles clustering near mile marker 287. I slowed, merged into the left lane to pass the congestion, and that's when I saw the debris field. saw twisted metal and shattered glass, saw an accident scene that looked exactly as Station 1440 had described. But the accident was ahead of me, already occurred, already complete. I wasn't involved. I was just passing by. Station 1440 had been wrong. Then I felt the impact from behind. Massive force slamming into my trailer, pushing my truck forward, and I was suddenly out of control, crossing into the median, heading toward oncoming traffic, and I understood in the final seconds before collision that Station 1440 hadn't been wrong. It had just been reporting the complete story, including the vehicle that would hit me from behind, pushing me into the oncoming lanes, creating the exact accident it had predicted. The last thing I heard before impact was the DJ's voice. This has been Station 1440, broadcasting from the future, confirming the death of Christine Alvarez at mile marker 287 on I-40. Our predictions are never wrong. Our timeline is absolute. Thank you for listening, Ms. Alvarez. We hope your final moments were enlightened by the knowledge we provided. Then the collision, the crushing metal, the explosive sound, the sudden darkness. And then nothing. I am dead, I realized, or dying, or somewhere between, and Station 1440 is still broadcasting. Still reporting on my accident, still interviewing my family, still providing details about the funeral arrangements being made for me. I can still hear it even in death, the radio station that predicts death, that orchestrates death, that makes its predictions self-fulfilling by broadcasting them to the victims, by creating paranoia and fear and desperation that lead inevitably to the predicted outcomes. If you find Station 1440 while scanning your AM radio, if you hear a DJ reporting your death before it happens, don't try to prevent it. Don't change your route. Don't delay your trip. Don't attempt to avoid your predicted fate. Because Station 1440 isn't warning you. It's targeting you. And every action you take to avoid the prediction becomes part of the causality that creates it. Just turn off the radio. Drive your route normally. Live your life without the knowledge of your death date. Because knowing doesn't help. Knowing only ensures that the prediction comes true exactly as described. I wish I'd turned off the radio when I first found Station 1440. I wish I'd never heard the DJ announce my death at mile marker 287. But I listened, and I tried to change it. And in trying to change it, I made it happen exactly as predicted. Station 1440 is never wrong. Its timeline is absolute. Its predictions are self-fulfilling prophecies. Don't listen. Don't try to cheat death. Don't let knowledge of your end time corrupt your present. Just drive. Just live. Just exist without the burden of knowing exactly when and where and how you'll die. That's the only way to win against Station 1440. By refusing to play the game, by turning off the radio before it turns your death into breaking news. Story 7. The delivery to yesterday. The GPS directed me to deliver cargo that had already been delivered to a warehouse that confirmed receipt of my load 3 days ago, before I'd even picked it up. I'm Lawrence Park, 42 years old, hauling auto parts from Detroit to Nashville on August 9, 2023. But according to every system and every witness, I'd made this exact delivery on August 6th, 3 days earlier. In a time frame where I'd been making a completely different delivery to a completely different city. The warehouse supervisor in Nashville looked at me with confusion when I backed into the loading dock. "Park, you're back? Did you forget something? We processed your delivery on the 6th. Everything was perfect, shipment complete." "This is my first time here," I insisted, showing him my manifest dated August 9th. "I just picked up this load from Detroit yesterday." He showed me his receiving records, showed me my signature dated August 6th, showed me security footage of my truck backing into this exact dock 3 days ago, showed me myself unloading auto parts that I hadn't picked up yet. "That's impossible," I said, watching the footage. "I was in Chicago on August 6th, Different load, different route, completely different location. The supervisor pulled up my company's GPS records, showed me my truck's location history, and there were two conflicting timelines. One showing me in Chicago on August 6th, the other showing me in Nashville. Both were legitimate, both were verified, both were impossibly true simultaneously. I called my dispatcher, Frank, and he checked the computer systems. Park, according to our records, you made the Nashville delivery on the 6th, but you also made the Chicago delivery on the 6th. You were in two places simultaneously, completing two different hauls at the same time. How is that possible? I don't know. But it's been happening all week. Multiple drivers reporting timeline conflicts, deliveries made before they're scheduled, cargo arriving at destinations before it's picked up. Something's wrong with causality, Lawrence. Time is splitting, creating duplicates, allowing past and future to exist concurrently. I returned to my truck and found evidence of the earlier delivery I didn't remember making. The cargo straps were arranged differently than I'd arranged them. The trailer had new scratches I hadn't noticed before. My logbook showed entries in my handwriting describing the Nashville delivery on August 6th, complete with details I'd never experienced. I was living in two timelines simultaneously, I realized, experiencing both versions of August 6th, both deliveries existing as equally real and valid. Some version of me, some Lawrence Park from a parallel timeline or temporal echo had made the delivery 3 days ago. And now I was making it again, or perhaps for the first time, depending on which timeline was considered primary. My phone showed conflicting calendars. One calendar said it was August 9th, another said it was August 6th, a third said it was August 12th. All three dates coexisted on my phone screen, all three timelines claiming to be the present moment. I drove away from the Nashville warehouse intending to return to Detroit to report the timeline conflict, to get answers about what was happening to causality. But the highway was splitting, lanes dividing into different temporal streams, and each lane led to a different date, a different version of the present moment. I stayed in the center lane trying to maintain my position in August 9th, but other vehicles were shifting between timelines, trucks appearing and disappearing as they changed lanes and changed dates. I saw my own truck in adjacent lanes, other Lawrences driving other versions of this route, all of us existing simultaneously, all confused by the temporal fragmentation. A trucker in the next lane waved at me, and I recognized him as myself, wearing different clothes, driving the same truck with a different load. He rolled down his window, shouted across the lanes, "Lawrence, which date are you in?" "August 9th, I shouted back. "You?" "August 6th. I'm heading to Nashville for the delivery. Don't go there. They'll say you already delivered. It's a time loop. You'll be stuck repeating the same route forever." "I already went," I shouted. "Already delivered, or I will deliver. I don't know anymore." He disappeared as his lane merged with a different temporal stream, and I was alone again, driving through fragmented causality, watching reality split into multiple incompatible timelines, all claiming to be the present moment. The GPS was showing impossible routes, directing me to locations in the past, to cities I'd visited years ago, to addresses that wouldn't exist for decades. I was unstuck in time, I realized, no longer bound to linear progression, able to deliver to yesterday or tomorrow or last year. All destinations, equally accessible, all moments equally present. I made deliveries to dates that had already passed, picked up cargo from dates that hadn't arrived yet, drove routes through multiple timelines simultaneously. I was becoming temporal, losing my anchor to any specific moment, existing in all moments at once. And I wasn't alone. Other drivers were experiencing the same fragmentation, the same timeline splits, the same impossible simultaneity. We passed each other on highways that existed in multiple eras, waved to ourselves across temporal lanes, tried to maintain identity across causality that was collapsing. I am Lawrence Park, 42 years old, and I am delivering to yesterday and tomorrow and last year and next month, all simultaneously, all equally real. I am making hauls that have already been made and haven't been made yet and are currently being made, all at once. Time has fractured for drivers, has split us across multiple moments, has made us temporal echoes repeating our routes eternally across all possible dates. If you see a truck appearing and disappearing on the highway, if you recognize the driver as someone you know but from a different time, if deliveries are completed before they're scheduled, don't be alarmed. We're just making deliveries to yesterday, hauling cargo across fragmented time, driving through causality that no longer follows linear rules. We're stuck in temporal loops, completing routes that have no beginning or end, just eternal repetition across all moments simultaneously. The delivery to yesterday has become the delivery to all days, and we can't stop, can't rest, can't escape the routes that exist in all timelines at once. We're driving forever across all time, delivering cargo that arrives before it's sent, completing hauls that have already been completed and haven't been started yet. That's trucking now, in the era of fractured causality, in the reality where time has split and drivers are caught in the fragmentation, eternally making deliveries to moments that no longer follow sequential order. Welcome to the road. Welcome to all the roads across all time forever. Story 8. The Hitchhiker Who Follows. I picked her up outside Boise, and when I dropped her off in Salt Lake City, she was waiting for me at my next stop in Denver. I'm Angela Torres, 29 years old, hauling textiles from Portland to Omaha on October 5, 2023, and the hitchhiker I'd given a ride to had somehow traveled faster than me, arrived at my destination before I did, appeared at every stop along my route despite me leaving her behind repeatedly. She'd looked harmless when she'd flagged me down on I-84, maybe mid-20s, carrying a small backpack, sign reading East. I normally don't pick up hitchhikers, but something about her expression, desperate, exhausted, terrified, made me stop. "Thank you," she'd said, climbing into my cab. "I need to get as far east as possible. Something's following me and I can't let it catch up." "What's following you?" I'd asked, pulling back onto the highway. "Myself," she'd said. "A version of me from a timeline that collapsed. She's trying to merge with me, to survive by absorbing me, and everywhere I go she's one step behind, closing the gap." I thought she was crazy, probably on drugs, definitely troubled. But she was quiet during the drive, staring out the window, checking mirrors constantly, watching the road behind us with paranoid intensity. When I dropped her at a truck stop in Salt Lake City, she thanked me, walked into the building, and I continued toward Denver, glad to be rid of the strange, frightened woman. 6 hours later, when I arrived at my delivery warehouse in Denver, she was standing at the loading dock, waiting, wearing the same clothes, carrying the same backpack, smiling when she saw me. "Thank you for the ride," she said, like we were meeting for the first time, like she hadn't been in my truck 6 hours ago, 2 states away. "How did you get here?" I demanded. "I dropped you in Salt Lake City. I drove straight through. How are you ahead of me?" "I told you," she said patiently. "I'm being followed by a version of myself. But I didn't tell you the complete truth. I'm not the one being followed. I'm the one following. You picked up the version of me that's running, and I'm the version that's chasing. We're the same person, split across timelines, and everywhere she goes, I go, and everywhere you take her, I'll be waiting." I backed away from her, from the impossible woman who'd traveled faster than my truck, who'd arrived before I'd arrived, who claimed to be chasing herself across multiple timelines. "Stay away from me," I said. "I'm not picking up any more hitchhikers. I'm not getting involved in whatever's happening to you." She smiled sadly. "Too late. You already picked her up. You already became part of the convergence. Now every stop you make will have one of us waiting. Her running forward, me chasing from behind, both of us existing at your destinations, both of us trying to convince you we're the real one, the one who deserves to survive the merger. I completed my delivery and drove away, refusing to look back, refusing to acknowledge the hitchhiker's impossible presence. But at every subsequent stop, fuel in Cheyenne, food in North Platte, rest in Lincoln, both versions of her were there. The terrified runner and the determined chaser, both claiming to be the original, both begging for help, both warning me about the other. She's lying, the runner said at the Cheyenne fuel stop. She's the collapsed timeline version. If she merges with me, she'll consume my existence, will take over my life, will erase me from reality. You have to help me stay ahead of her. She's lying, the chaser said at the North Platte restaurant. She's the collapsed version, and she's trying to steal my life by convincing people she's the original. I need to catch her, to absorb her, to restore the correct timeline. You have to help me catch up to her. At the Lincoln rest area, both versions arrived simultaneously, confronted each other. Mirror images arguing about which was real, which deserved to exist, which should survive the inevitable merger. I have memories of our childhood, the runner said. I remember our mother, our home, our life before the timeline split. I have the same memories, the chaser countered. Memories aren't proof of originality. We're both equally real, both equally valid, both carrying the same past. The only difference is that one of us will survive the merger and one will be absorbed. They turned to me, both versions asking me to decide, to choose which one was the original, which one I'd help escape or help catch. I can't decide this, I said. I don't know which of you is real. I don't even understand how both of you can exist. Then we'll decide, they said in unison, and they moved toward each other. And when they touched, they began to merge, their bodies blending, their features averaging, their separate existences combining into a single form. The merger was violent, both versions struggling, fighting for dominance, each trying to be the primary consciousness in the combined form. I watched in horror as they dissolved into each other, as their individual identities competed for survival, as the timeline attempted to resolve the paradox of their simultaneous existence. When the merger completed, a single woman stood where two had been fighting, and she looked at me with eyes that held two different expressions simultaneously, and she spoke with two voices layered over each other. Thank you for witnessing, both voices said. The merger is complete, but the conflict isn't resolved. We're both still here, both still fighting for control of this body, this life, this existence. We'll travel with you now, inhabit your truck, haunt your route, because you're the only witness to our split, the only person who saw both versions, the only one who can confirm we were once separate. She climbed into my truck without invitation, sat in the passenger seat, and I couldn't make her leave, couldn't force her out because she existed in a paradox state, simultaneously invited and uninvited, passenger and trespasser, welcome and unwelcome. She travels with me still, the merged hitchhiker, two consciousnesses in one body, eternally fighting for dominance, switching between personalities mid-sentence, remembering events from both timelines, experiencing life through doubled perspective. And everywhere I stop, I see other versions of her, other splits and mergers, other timeline fragments that haven't fully resolved. The hitchhiker, who follows, exists in multiple states across multiple locations, and I'm trapped in her narrative, forced to witness her continued fragmentation. I am Angela Torres, 29 years old, and I'm haunted by the hitchhiker who follows, who exists at every destination, who merged but didn't fully resolve, who travels with me as a paradox passenger. If you see a hitchhiker who appears at multiple locations, who seems to exist in quantum superposition, who claims to be running from herself, don't pick her up. She'll follow you forever, will exist at every stop, will merge without resolving, will become a permanent passenger in your vehicle and your life. The hitchhiker who follows is still following, still waiting at every destination, still existing in the paradox state between separate and merged, between runner and chaser, between two versions of one person who can't agree on which should survive. And I'm still driving, still carrying her, still witnessing her eternal conflict, with no end in sight, no resolution possible, just endless travel with an impossible passenger who exists in all states simultaneously. Story 9. The inspection that never ends. The DOT inspection started at 9 a.m. on November 12, 2023 at a roadside checkpoint in rural Montana. And 16 hours later, I was still being inspected, the officer still finding violations, the checklist still extending with new requirements. I'm Kevin Russo, 56 years old, hauling frozen foods from Billings to Missoula, and the inspection that should have taken 30 minutes has trapped me in an eternal loop of violations, corrections, and additional violations that appear as soon as I fix the previous ones. The officer, whose name tag read Inspector J. Morrison, approached my truck with a clipboard and a smile that was professionally pleasant but emotionless. "Random inspection, Mr. Russo. This should be quick. Just need to verify your documents, check your vehicle, ensure everything's in compliance." I handed over my license, registration, logbook, medical card, all the documents that DOT inspections require, and Inspector Morrison reviewed them with meticulous attention. "Your medical card expires in 6 months. That's compliant, but barely. I recommend renewing earlier." "It's valid for 6 months," I said. "That's fully compliant." "Technically, yes," Morrison agreed, and he made a note on his clipboard. "But we like to see drivers maintaining longer validity periods. I'm going to mark this as a minor concern, not a violation, just a recommendation for improvement." The inspection continued. Morrison checked my lights, my brakes, my tires, my fifth wheel connection, my trailer doors, every component of my truck and cargo, and each item was either compliant or generated a minor concern that required attention. "Your left rear tire has uneven wear pattern," Morrison said, measuring tread depth. "Still above minimum legal depth, still technically compliant, but the uneven wear suggests potential alignment issues. I recommend having your alignment checked." "The tire is legal," I said, frustration building. "Uneven wear isn't a violation if tread depth is sufficient." "No violation," Morrison confirmed, making another note. "Just another recommendation. I'm trying to help you maintain your vehicle, Mr. Russo. Prevention is better than failure." After 3 hours, Morrison had found 0 actual violations but 17 recommendations for improvement, and he wasn't done. "Now we'll inspect your cargo, need to verify temperature control, proper loading, secure strapping." He opened my refrigerated trailer and checked the temperature, 32 degrees exactly as required, and examined my frozen foods, testing cargo straps, measuring load distribution, checking for any sign of shifting or damage. "Cargo is secured, but I'd prefer to see additional straps for redundancy. Not legally required for this load type, but recommended for optimal safety. I'm going to have to note that." "How many recommendations can you make before I'm cleared?" I asked, and Morrison consulted his clipboard, flipping through pages that seemed to multiply as he looked at them. "Depends on what else I find," he said. "But don't worry, Mr. Russo, once everything is addressed, you'll be cleared for travel." Hour 4. Morrison discovered my fire extinguisher, while fully charged and compliant, was mounted 6 inches lower than his agency's optimal height recommendation. Hour 5, my cargo securement straps, while meeting all legal requirements, were a brand he preferred to see replaced with higher-rated alternatives. Every finding was technically compliant, but somehow insufficient. Every component met legal requirements but fell short of some standard that existed in Morrison's mind or on his ever-expanding checklist. By hour 8, I'd replaced the fire extinguisher mounting bracket, upgraded my cargo straps, adjusted my tire pressure to Morrison's preferred specifications rather than the legal range, realigned my headlights to his exact standards, and made 17 other recommended improvements. And Morrison just moved to new sections of his inspection checklist, finding new areas of concern, new recommendations, new requirements that appeared spontaneously. Your insurance documentation is compliant, but I'd like to see additional liability coverage beyond the legal minimum. Not required, but recommended. Can you contact your insurance company and upgrade your policy? Right now? During the inspection? If possible, Morrison said pleasantly. Otherwise, I'll have to note it as an unaddressed recommendation which may impact your safety rating. I called my insurance company, upgraded my policy at significant expense, and showed Morrison the updated documentation. He made a note, smiled, and moved to the next item. Hour 12. I'd spent thousands of dollars on upgrades, adjustments, and replacements, all for items that were already compliant, all to satisfy Morrison's endless recommendations. The sun had set. The checkpoint was deserted except for my truck and Morrison's vehicle, and the inspection showed no sign of ending. Your logbook entries are compliant, but I'd prefer to see more detailed notes about your rest periods. Not legally required, but recommended for better record keeping. Can you amend your entries for the past month? Hour 16. I was amending logbook entries by flashlight, adding details that weren't required, satisfying requirements that didn't exist except in Morrison's ever-expanding checklist. Other trucks had passed the checkpoint throughout the day, waved through after brief inspections, normal 30-minute verifications. But I remained trapped, endlessly inspected, perpetually found to be compliant but insufficient, legally acceptable but recommended for improvement. When does this end? I finally screamed at Morrison, exhausted and financially drained and desperate. Everything is compliant. Everything meets every legal requirement. What more do you want? Morrison looked at me with that same pleasant, emotionless expression. I want perfection, Mr. Russo. The law sets minimums, but I inspect for optimal standards. Your truck meets legal requirements, yes, but it could be better. Everything can always be better. And until you've addressed every possible improvement, every potential enhancement, every recommendation I can make, the inspection continues. That's impossible, I said. There's always room for improvement. You could inspect forever, always finding something that could be better. Yes, Morrison agreed, and he smiled, and I understood then that the inspection would never end. That I'd be trapped at this checkpoint forever, endlessly improving, endlessly upgrading, endlessly satisfying recommendations that would spawn new recommendations, requirements that would generate new requirements. I am still there, at the roadside checkpoint in Montana, being inspected by Inspector J. Morrison, hour 1017 now. Or maybe hour 17,000, having replaced every component of my truck multiple times, having upgraded every system beyond any reasonable standard, having spent my life savings and my future earnings on improvements that never quite satisfy. Morrison is still finding recommendations, still extending his checklist, still inspecting with pleasant professionalism and absolute relentlessness. My truck is simultaneously the most compliant and most insufficient vehicle on the road, meeting every legal standard while falling short of Morrison's optimal recommendations, perfect by any objective measure but imperfect by Morrison's subjective standards. If you see a roadside checkpoint in Montana with a single truck being inspected, if you see an officer with a clipboard that has infinite pages, if you see a driver making endless improvements to a vehicle that's already compliant, don't stop. That's Inspector Morrison's checkpoint, the inspection that never ends, the eternal verification loop where compliant is never sufficient, where legal is never optimal, where every improvement spawns new recommendations. I am Kevin Russo, 56 years old, and I am still being inspected, still making improvements, still trapped in the loop where perfection is always one more recommendation away. The inspection never ends. The checklist never completes. The checkpoint never clears you for travel. That's the price of stopping, of submitting to inspection, of entering Morrison's eternal verification process. Drive past it. Don't stop. Don't let Morrison find the first minor concern that starts the infinite chain of recommendations. Because once the inspection starts, it never ends and you'll be trapped there forever, endlessly improving, eternally insufficient, permanently detained at the checkpoint where compliant means nothing and optimal is impossible.